Welcome to PAATH History YouTube channel. Subscribe our channel for regular notification and follow our official Facebook page, Twitter handle and Instagram. Like our video and comment. Today we are going to discuss about agriculture in ancient Egypt. The agricultural seasons and therefore the dominant rhythm of life in the Nile Valley were determined by the so nearly regular movements of the inundation. The rise began to be noticeable at Elephantine in June, but it would take up to another 2 weeks for it to reach Memphis. The Coptic calendar dated to June 18, the night of the drops, when a tear let fall by Isis caused the Nile to rise. This brought it close to June 23 in the Gregorian calendar, the theoretical New Year's Day of the Sothic calendar. The season of inundation, or Akhet, then was the first in the farmer's year. The Nile was being back between its banks by November. Now began PAATH, the sowing season. After 4 or 5 months, the harvest began, occupying much of the third season, Shemu. This was the lifeless time so far as the fields were concerned, when farmers could only wait for Isis to shed her next tear. A great variety of cereal crops have been claimed for ancient Egypt, but most of these claims do not stand up to archaeological and other forms of scrutiny. For pharaonic times, the only grains quite reliably identified are barley and emmer wheat or triticum decocorn, though a single identification suggests that a little millet may have been grown. Durum or macaroni wheat was probably introduced during the late period. Barley, mainly of the 4 and 6 rod varieties, seems to have been the more important crop for the Old and Middle Kingdoms. This generally beneficial reversal of the cereal history of Sumer and Akkad was made possible by freedom from salinization. It seems that the vitamin-rich sprouted barley was used for food in Egypt. Perhaps because cultivation was easy, the Egyptian farmers were conservative rather than inventive in their design of implements. So far as is known, plows were not in use during the Archaic period. The plough, which was adopted early in the Old Kingdom, was little more than an enlarged hoe with a second handle and shaft added. Ploughs of this kind are represented in early hieroglyphs. They were drawn by a pair of oxen or donkeys, the ploughman holding the handles and driving the point into the ground. The Egyptians seem never to have thought it worthwhile to attach a drill as the Sumerians did. The sower carried the seed grain in a handled bag and scattered it. In some pictures, he appears to be walking in front of the ploughing oxen as though it were intended that they should help to trample it in. The main work of treading in the seed, however, was undoubtedly performed by the flocks of sheep driven across the field after the sowing. By the earliest dynastic times, the straight reaping knife of the prehistoric past had been replaced by a crescentic fork, but the cutting edge was still provided by serrated flint blade lets set in a groove. The grain was trodden out by oxen or other farm animals and winnowed by being tossed into the air with wooden shovels. One tomb scene dating from New Kingdom times shows 8 men winnowing together, watched by their master. Finally, the grain was measured and stored in brick-built granaries, which might be either cylindrical or with rows of rectangular compartments. Abundance of vegetables and fruit was produced by means of the perennial irrigation of gardens and orchards. Leeks and onions were much eaten by peasants and workmen as they still are today. Cucumber, garlic, and lettuce were also grown, the last being thought to be the aphrodisiac of the phallic god Min, an association for the lettuce that may explain its popularity in Sumerian love songs. Radishes as well as onions and garlic were supplied to laborers on the Great Pyramid. Vegetable protein was forthcoming for the poor in the shape of beans, at least by the time of Ramesses II, who boasts of providing them in quantity for his workmen. Gourds and melons flourished between hot sun and moist soil. The Egyptians lavished hard work and tender care on their fruit trees. The sycamore fig and ordinary fig were common, but it was the date and the vine that contributed most to wealth, health, and happiness. Date palms might be grown on the river bank, scattered through the fields or around villages. Sometimes each tree stood in an artificial basin of mud which could be watered with the aid of a shaduf. Just as in Mesopotamia, dates were used for making fermented drinks as well as for food. It was probably the vine that received most attention of all, as is suggested by the compounding of the hieroglyphic sign for the vine in the words for gardener and orchard. The olive was never extensively grown in Egypt, although this certainly was not from lack of appreciation, as the very earliest record of its cultivation anywhere refers to the Egyptian importation of olive oil from Palestine and Syria during the 4th dynasty. Flax, the one important field crop, can find a place here, since it may originally have been cultivated for the oil pressed from its seeds. Among plants that made no contribution to the diet but were of economic importance, the papyrus sage is outstanding. It was used for boats, robes, mats, and sandals, as well as for papyrus. Although bread, onions, and other vegetable foods must have supplied the principal nourishment for humble peasants and workmen, large numbers of domestic animals were kept. Wheat and barley were of course the foundation of the whole agricultural economy, but little is known with certainty about the actual amount of the yield. Shortage of food among the poor, probably often quite local, were not unexpected. The well-known inscription from the island of Sahel near Elephantine, which purports to record how King Djoser of the Step Pyramid was sorrowing because of a 7-year famine caused by failures of the inundation, dates in fact from Ptolemaic times, yet probably represents some genuine tradition of a series of low Niles. No less often, however, shortages and famine must have resulted from the collapses of central government that led to failures in overall water control, local abuses, lawless disturbances, and civil wars that disrupted agriculture. Yet, although looking back across the records, references to food shortage and even famine seem quite frequent, as seen from the perspective of most men's lives, they would have appeared exceptional disasters. Moreover, the easy transport offered by the Nile made relief quite feasible. In times of shortage, grain and especially seed grain could be supplied from the granaries of each nome. The system by which many landowners in Upper Egypt had herds and other possessions in the delta enabled them to transfer rations from one to the other according to need. The relief of hunger among his subjects was also a responsibility of Pharaoh himself. So this is the end of our today's discussion. Subscribe our channel for regular notification. Follow our official Facebook page, Twitter handle and Instagram. Like our video and comment. For any query, feel free to mail us. For details, see the description.